Florida.
Support for the Groveland Four was provided in part by Jean L. Eads, the Matthew and Shelley Fitzgibbon Family Fund, and the Paul B. and Constance D. Hunter Foundation.
Norm and Willie Paget were a young married couple from Lake County, and there was obviously some trouble in the marriage, and they had separated.
Willie had the idea that maybe if he showed her a good enough time that he could talk her into coming back and resuming her role as a wife.
He invited her to a square dance.
He picks her up, and they head for the dance, stay there for a while, and then they go looking for food.
Yes, of course, with you.
Their car breaks down, and they are in the middle of nowhere on a small country road. They say that these 4 African Americans came along and offered to help them.
Can you help me?
The one thing that seems clear is that Norma and Willie were separated that morning.
She was seen standing outside of a place called Burtoft's Cafe.
Lawrence Burtoft opens his parents' cafe and sees this young woman, invites her in.
And she told him, "I need help."
And so they start driving around, and shortly thereafter they see her husband. At that point, the story explodes.
In the late 40s, early 50s, Lake County was the citrus capital of the world.
People that couldn't afford their own land worked for citrus barons, and it was really what the entire economy was built on.
And a key part of that economy was cheap labor provided by African Americans.
In 1949, Lake County's 938 square miles were almost entirely rural. Groveland, population 1,000, was one of several small towns that dotted the unrelentingly flat landscape. It was also home to Norma Tyson and Willie Paget.
Norma and Willie Paget were like a lot of people that came from poor families that grew up working the land. Norma came from a household of a lot of children. They all worked in the fields. She met Willie, who was also from a poor family. They eloped. He was 21 and she was 16. They found out quickly that they weren't well matched. She went from a tough situation to what turned out to be even a tougher situation. Within a year, she had moved back home. So they were separated going into the summer of 1949.
On the morning of July 16, 1949, Lawrence Burtoft was inside his parents' cafe. The small concrete block building sat alongside Route 33, 15 miles north of Groveland, in an area called Okahumpka.
I looked out to see if there was a delivery. It was early, very early, and I saw the woman. I went on out and asked her if she was waiting for someone, and she said no. She wasn't upset. There was nothing about her appearance that was alarming. She was dressed rather neat. I said, "Would you like to have a cup of coffee?" And she said yes. She said that the night before, they were on the way home, and car broke down, and he was trying to get it to work when some black people come by, men. They got in an argument, whatever happened, but they knocked him out and took her. So I asked her, did they hurt her? And she said no. And did you recognize them? And she said no, it was too dark. but that she would like to go down and see if we can find her husband if he's still down there, whether he's dead or not. But I drove her down to where she thought it was. We had only been there for maybe 5 minutes or less when a car pulled up, and it was her husband. It said, "Thank you," hugged her, they got in the car, and they left.
Willie and Norma returned to Groveland, where they met with Lake County Sheriff's Deputy James Yates. They gave the same story Norma had relayed to Lawrence Burtoft, with one crucial exception.
They told Officer Yates that 4 Negroes came along to help them, and that there was an argument, and that these men attacked Willie, and then they took Norma off with them, and that they had attacked her and sexually assaulted her. That was at least the story that she told Willis McCall when Deputy Yates called his boss, and McCall met with Norma at a diner there in Groveland.
In the 1940s and 50s in Lake County, Willis McCall was the hand of God. He was over 6 feet tall, heavy, over 200 pounds. He wore a Stetson hat. He looked the part. And he understood that it was his job in Lake County to make sure that African-American laborers went to their jobs in the orange groves, that they were there to keep the economy humming along. Willis McCall could not have been elected to office unless he had a reputation of knowing how to, quote unquote, keep blacks in line, and he did that with an element of pride and relentlessness. Willis McCall was known for beating blacks, entering their homes without justification, in one case knocking a gentleman unconscious in front of his wife and son, tossing him over his shoulder, putting him in the car and taking him to jail to make sure that he eventually ended up in the orange groves.
Norma and Willie told McCall they didn't know the 4 young men they said had stopped early that morning. But Lake County law enforcement apparently had their own ideas about the alleged perpetrators.
Deputy Yates was focused on Sammy Shepard and Walter Irvin, 2 Army vets who had been around town and caught the attention of law enforcement because they hadn't gone back into the groves like they were expected to.
Sammy Shepard had been kind of a sore point. He didn't want to pick oranges. He was very independent. His family owned land, which was very unusual for African Americans, and so they were able to exist on their own.
The Irvin and Shepard families were close. They had lived in Groveland for years, and the children were the same ages. Just weeks earlier, Walter's sister had married Sammy's brother.
Walter was ready to start something else in his life. He wanted to do more than he was going to do in Groveland. He wasn't going to do anything but work in the Grove.
So it seems that Yates wanted to talk to Sam Shepard, and Shepard said, "I was out with Walter Irvin last night," and that's when they went to the Irvin household, and Yates arrested Walter Irvin.
The 2 suspects told law enforcement they hadn't seen Norma and Willie that morning, but Irvin later confided in his family.
Walter said that he was coming along the road and these people was broke down and they stopped to help him. Sammy was a mechanic. His dad was a mechanic, so he knew all about cars. So he got them started. They had a bottle, and she offered the bottle to the guys to take a drink. And from that way it started from. The husband called him, and after that, Sam hit him. It was a little scuffle between the guy, the girl's husband, and Sam. They was arguing, him and her. They left.
Yates wanted to, it seems, break the case and hand it to his boss in a nice, tidy package. I've got confessions. I've got everything that we need. Here are the guys who did it.
They drove out and parked along the woods on a clay road. Told us, "Get out of the car, boy." I didn't see who grabbed Sammy, but one short guy hit me with his billy a lot of times across the head. He held me, and a lot of the others started hitting me with billies and fists and knocking me down and kicking me and picking me up and knocking me down again. This went on for about 20 minutes. They said to me, "You the one that picked up this white girl last night." I said to them, "What white girl?" They said, well, you might as well tell us you're the one did it, because we're going to beat the hell out of you until you tell us you did do it. I still told them I was not the one.
Sheriff McCall now had 2 suspects, but he needed 2 more. Suspicion next fell on a gregarious but naive 16-year-old who had arrived in Groveland just the day before.
On July 15th, Charles Greenlee probably made the worst decision of his life. He accepted an invitation from an older fellow that he worked with named Ernest Thomas.
My father decided that he was going to follow this older guy down to Groveland and work in the orange groves.
They hitched rides and got into Lake County in the afternoon, and Charles had never been there before.
He told Ernest that, you go on, I'm dirty, I can't go to your mother's house, I'll stay here until you come back.
So Ernest Thomas said, fine, I'll drop you off here at the train depot, which was right at the edge of town.
Ernest then came back and gave me something to eat. When he said that he could not get me any clothes for me until the next day, I told him that I would wait here for him. This was about 5 o'clock. Ernest then gave me a .45 Colt revolver. He said his father gave it to him. He gave me the gun to keep for the night, though when I asked for it, I was only joking. It was about 1:30 or 2 o'clock because I heard one of the night watchmen say the time to the other. So I took the gun out of my bag and I stuck it in my belt. I walked around to the gas station to get more water and saw the 2 night watchmen sitting down the road a pee. As I straightened up, they shined a light on me. As I turned around, they saw the gun on me. They searched me and they arrested me. The 2 had said that I was a nice boy. In fact, one of them said, let me go. But the other one said we had better wait until morning, until after the cop come to see if they have anything on me. When cop come, he put me into the car and put me in the jail at Groveland.
That morning, Willie and Norma had been brought to the Groveland jail by Deputy Yates, and Charles had no idea who they were. They're standing outside the cell. Is that him? Does that look like one of them?
The man said, that's not one of the boys. The woman said, he looks like one of them. The man said again, no, he's not one of them. Then they turned and they went off. Then the man came back himself and asked me, was I with the boys? I asked him, what boys he talking about? And he said, the boys what took me out of the ditch last night. I said, no, sir, I wasn't with them. And he went off then.
Charles had been brought to the Groveland jail at about 3:15 a.m., the same time Norma Paget said she was being assaulted by 4 black men some 15 miles away.
Charles Greenlee really is the saddest story in this whole thing. As far as anyone can tell, he never met Irvin or Shepard, was not involved in this at all. He just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
It wasn't because the Pagets fingered him. It seems to be because Sheriff McCall decided you were with this notorious Ernest Thomas, who's been a troublemaker for as long as I can remember. And Willie Paget said, there's 4 guys. I got Shepard, I got Irvin, I'm going to get Thomas, that's 3. Greenlee was with Thomas, he must be the 4th.
Later on the 16th, Irvin, Shepard, and Greenlee were moved to cells in the county courthouse building in Tavares. But McCall still wanted confessions.
Deputies Yates and Campbell took them one at a time down to the basement and beat them mercilessly.
They taken me down first. They handcuffed me over a pipe. Then they started beating me again.
Gonna tell us what we need to hear?
And this happened not once, but several times. They would take one upstairs and throw him in the cell and let the other guys look at how bloodied and battered he was, and then 10 minutes later they'd take another one down.
Eventually, Shepard and Greenlee both confessed just to stop the beatings. They both said they thought they were going to get killed, but Irvin never confessed.
Word spread really fast. There had been these 4 Negro brutes that had gone wild and ravished this young woman, and as many as 200 to 300 stormed the Lake County jail and said, we want the prisoners. We're going to administer justice right now. We're going to take them and lynch them.
Willis McCall got wind of it and removed Irvin and Shepard from the jail.
McCall sent the 2 suspects to Rayford State Prison, 2 hours to the north. He then confronted the mob that had gathered outside the Tavares courthouse.
Sheriff McCall said, these guys will get what they got coming, but you're not going to break anybody out and lynch them. I'll take care of this. You elected me to enforce law and order, and that's what I'm going to do.
The boys aren't even here.
The mob wouldn't disperse. McCall finally said, look, I'll compromise with you. So Willie Pageant and his father-in-law, Coy Tyson, were allowed to go into the jail, and they came out and said, the guys who did this to me and Norma are not here. And then the mob dispersed.
The next day, Sunday, July 17th, a crowd once again gathered in Groveland. Many were Klan members, both from within and outside Lake County.
McCall, of course, knew what they were planning almost as soon as they were planning it. He was well connected to everybody who was involved. In fact, the local head of the Klan from Eustis had been in the basement while the prisoners were being beaten. McCall basically brokered a deal with them and said, okay, have at it. Don't let it get too crazy. Do what you got to do, and then you all go home. So McCall literally stood and watched the rioting and watched them burn houses to the ground.
As the mob's intentions became clear, nearly every African-American family fled Groveland.
Someone came to my mother's door and told we had to leave quickly. She said, why? She said, because a poor boy had raped a white girl. So as my mother was packing, I went on the porch by the mattress and went to sleep. I woke up that morning, they had gone. So I went into the woods, and I seen the Ku Klux Klans with the sheets over their head, the eyes cut out, torched and burned down houses. They didn't see me, but I seen them.
Hundreds of whites descend upon Groveland and begin burning down African-American homes, destroying African-American crops, running African-Americans out of town.
And over the next several nights, there were increasingly more violent caravans through Groveland's neighborhood. Ku Klux Klan pamphlets are being handed out.
Most of this happened over the weekend, but Monday morning came around and there was nobody to work in the fields, and that's when the citrus barons basically started saying, hey, you know what? We just chased away our labor force. We need to get this thing over with. We need to reassure them that it's safe to return to Lake County because the groves need to be worked.
McCall finally agreed to request help. A small local detachment of National Guardsmen lacking adequate weapons was run out by the mob. A larger, better equipped unit from Tampa replaced them.
First thing I did, I put a 50 caliber machine gun at the apex of the road that went from Groveland to Claremont. I had the men just drape the ammunition across the top, didn't put the ammunition in the weapon so that the people could see that we had ammunition. A truck pulled up and 4 of the rednecks jumped out, ran over toward the sergeant, and the sergeant didn't do anything. He just raised his gun and fired about 6 rounds in the air. And the men almost broke their necks getting back in the vehicle and taking off and never saw them again. Once they saw that we really meant business, we really had no problem.
McCall standing down the mob was really the first big media salvo in this case where northern papers jumped on this case and started reporting it.
He was praised for talking down the lynch mob, but he also played to his base by talking about how they were going to get convictions. Within just 2 days, he was bragging that the defendants had confessed.
As he so often did throughout his career, McCall was talking plenty to the press. One of his most loyal early supporters was a local newspaper woman.
The local media, primarily Mabel Norris Reese of the Mount Dora Topic, were pretty much taking McCall's account of what happened verbatim. He was telling Reese and other local reporters basically that this was a slam dunk case. We got the guys. I've got everything under control, and that's what they reported without question. The Orlando Sentinel expressed an opinion in the case long before they were even ready to go to trial. with an editorial cartoon on the front page, said these guys are going to fry.
On Wednesday, July 20th, just 4 days after the alleged assault, State Attorney Jesse Hunter went before a grand jury. Norma Paget testified, as did Willis McCall, who claimed 3 of the accused had confessed. The jury returned an indictment that day. A few days later, the trial was set for August 29th, but McCall still only had 3 suspects in custody.
Once this uprising in Lake County had been quelled and Sheriff McCall thought it was safe to leave, organized a posse, deputized a bunch of good old boys who had no business being law enforcement, but they knew how to fire a rifle, so they were in, including members that were related to Norma and Willie Paget.
The manhunt stretched across nearly 200 miles and several counties. At one point, the posse grew to 1,000 armed men.
They chased Thomas through the woods for 2 days. And finally they found him resting underneath a tree. And they shot him full of holes.
McCall's plan for swift executions was proceeding, but a bookish African-American educator had other ideas.
I think the most significant change in this story, that Willis McCall had saved their lives from a lynch mob and they had confessed, really was instigated by Harry T. Moore.
Harry T. Moore in the 1940s was the head of the Florida Conference of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and was not only leading African Americans in the fight for their civil rights in the state, aggressively pursuing voter registration. He wrote the governors, he wrote to the national offices of the NAACP, he wrote to the president, he wrote to the Department of Justice, anyone who he thought could bring aid and attention. And it's really for that reason that he gained a lot of negative attention from the white power structure in the state of Florida.
He hired a young NAACP attorney from Tampa named William Fordham, sent him to Rayford, where he got written affidavits from Irvin, Greenlee, and Shepard documenting the brutal beatings that they had suffered at the hands of McCall's deputies.
We can thank William Fordham for bringing a medical person, because they noted every scar, bruise, bump, broken tooth, laceration on the prisoners, and they recorded it. The FBI then also sent field agents, because the NAACP said these guys were tortured, and the FBI report mirrored the report that Fordham had made.
Thanks to Moore's efforts and press reports, attorneys in the NAACP's national office in New York were by now well aware of the Groveland case. Thurgood Marshall was head of the group's Legal Defense Fund, a small team of lawyers and aides. Marshall was widely, if begrudgingly, viewed as one of the best lawyers in the country. Of the many criminal cases that came into the office, Marshall had time for very few. But he did make exceptions.
So they contacted an Orlando attorney, one of the few black attorneys in the state, and said, you need to start getting depositions and finding out information.
Marshall also dispatched a young attorney from his office who immediately flew to Orlando.
Franklin Williams was very intense, was very proud, was very dedicated. He kept the national press looking at Groveland. And if the national press didn't look as early as they did, then those guys might have ended up swinging from a tree and we would never even know their names.
Williams needed a lawyer license to practice in Florida. Of the handful of black attorneys in the state, none were qualified to lead the defense in such a high-profile capital case.
So he starts calling on white attorneys, and nobody wants to touch it.
Finally, after all these refusals, he convinced Alex Ackerman, an attorney from Orlando, to take the case.
He did so knowing full well it would cost him his political career and probably severely affect his ability to practice law in that state.
Ackerman was retained on August 22nd. He had 1 week to prepare for a complex criminal case, and he hadn't yet met his clients. The prosecution, on the other hand, was moving forward.
McCall and the prosecutor, Jesse Hunter, wanted to make sure that there wouldn't be any sort of testimony from members of the family of the accused that might gum up the works, so to speak. So they actually started putting them in jail. They arrested Sammy Shepard's brother James when they know he had absolutely no involvement, arrested one of Charles Greenlee's brothers to send the message of, you play nice or you might end up implicated in this thing too. Pure intimidation tactics.
McCall had another reason to lean on the Greenlee family.
They wanted to charge to turn evidence on these other two guys. So the sheriff from Levy County came, picked my mom up, took over to Rayford, and he said, Mom, I can't tell no lie on these guys just to benefit me. I can't do it.
On August 25th, Judge Truman Futch granted Ackerman's motion to postpone the trial, giving him all of 3 additional days to prepare. Ackerman lost all 3 when a hurricane tore through Central Florida later that week, knocking out power and telephone lines. He managed to file motions for a change of venue and to introduce evidence of the beatings, but they were denied by Judge Futch.
Alex Ackerman had absolutely no cooperation from the prosecutor. There was no discovery. So the defense was woefully unprepared.
Early on, Hunter and McCall had interviewed Lawrence Burtoft, the young man who had spoken to Norma just hours after the alleged incident. But realizing Burtoft's testimony would not help his case, Hunter placed his name on a list of potential prosecution witnesses, then simply didn't call him to testify. The trial began on Friday, September 2nd, in the same building where 6 weeks earlier, Irvin, Shepard, and Greenlee had been brutally beaten.
This trial was like a scene right out of To Kill a Mockingbird. 12 white men on the jury, 400 people packed the courthouse, 75 blacks in the balcony. There were newspaper reporters from New York, from Chicago, from black newspapers around the country. I mean, the focus and national attention on this case was extreme. The prosecuting attorney for Lake County was Jesse Hunter. He was a wily, sort of self-educated lawyer, but a smart man. And what smart prosecutors do is lead with your strongest witnesses, which was Willie and Norma Paget. So Willie got up first and told his story, but clearly the most sensational, riveting testimony in the trial came from Norma herself.
That Thomas, well, later I'd learn his name. He forced me to, he jerked my dress up and I pulled it back down and he jerked it up again and told me to leave it there. He had a gun on me and he raped me first.
The prosecutor's main expert witness was Deputy Yates, who was McCall's primary deputy. He introduced Walter Irvin's pants, which he claimed had semen stains on them. And then the most controversial piece of evidence, Walter Irvin's shoes. Yates described how he went out to the alleged scene of the rape and made a cast of Walter Irvin's footprints in the mud, and he claimed that there was a perfect match between the tread on the shoes and the tread on these plaster casts. They did not call the doctor to testify. They had no medical evidence that a rape had even occurred.
The defense really didn't have anything because they were winging it. Alex Ackerman had only spent less than 30 minutes with each of the defendants finding out their stories.
Irvin and Shepard both testified, and frankly, they didn't do that much good for themselves. They were disorganized. The one who was the most sympathetic witness was Charles Greenlee.
He came off like he was as this nervous, scared kid.
I forgot about the gun because I didn't try to hide it. And whenever I leaned over the faucet, the fountain that was there to get a drink of water.
He told them everything that the night watchman did, from the time he came on till the time he left, both times. He said, so it was clear. The thing that he kept thinking, everything be cleared up, and it would be over.
The only card that Alex Ackerman had was that Charlie Greenlee was being arrested for having a gun in his belt at 3:10 in the morning in Groveland, 6 miles away from where Norma Pageant said she was being raped at 3:15. This guy couldn't have been there. And if he wasn't there, then the gun wasn't there. And if the gun wasn't there, there was no attack. Because Norma's already testified that that gun that was introduced as an exhibit was the one that was held on her.
So the jury is excused to deliberate. And at that point, Judge Truman Futch calls Alex Ackerman, the defense attorney, to the bench, and he shows him a door behind his bench and tells them that when the jury returns and gives their verdict, that he and his defense team should exit out of this door, and says he'll keep the crowd there for 30 minutes to give them time to get out of town.
And the joke was that the jury would be back as soon as the guys finished smoking their cigars, because nobody was going to throw away a cigar. And that's about how long it took them to deliberate.
So the jury comes and they return guilty verdict against all three. Irvin and Shepard get death sentences. Charlie Greenlee, the jury recommended mercy. He was given a life sentence.
The guilty verdict surprised no one, including the defense lawyers. They immediately began the appeal process, taking the case first to the Florida Supreme Court.
They decided to leave Greenlee out of the appeal.
He was only 16. The jury had recommended mercy, so he ended up with a life sentence, and they were afraid if he went back to trial at 18 or older, he could end up with a death sentence as well.
Since August 1949, the FBI had been looking into the beatings of Irvin, Shepard, and Greenlee. Their investigation wrapped up in early 1950.
The FBI concluded that these prisoners had been subjected to and beaten and had their civil rights denied.
The Department of Justice refers to the U.S. Attorney in Tampa, Herbert Phillips, an avowed segregationist. Phillips had once publicly called African Americans an ignorant and inferior race. Phillips did not call the investigating FBI agents nor any officials from Rayford.
And the grand jury ended up praising once again for saving their lives and basically clearing the deputies of any civil rights violations.
Of course, the FBI was, because they knew there was something to the charges. They had seen the beatings, and they had photos. But the legal remedy was accepted, and there really wasn't any way to reopen it.
Paul had escaped legal jeopardy, a Houdini-like talent he would display again. But he hardly escaped criticism.
He was trying to protest what happened in every way he could. Letters to the state attorney, to the governor, to the feds, at every level, trying to deal with the beatings and what had occurred to them. But he also used an organizing tool to try to build the NAACP in Florida. And he would say to other African American families, if it could happen to them, it could happen to me, it could happen to your son.
Willis McCall was famous for collecting all of his newspaper clippings, good or bad. He was well aware of Harry Moore's activism. In May, the Florida Supreme Court denied the appeal. Next up, the United States Supreme Court. Marshall himself would lead the effort. Oral arguments before the court took place March 1951. Exactly 1 month later, the justices unanimously overturned the convictions of Irvin and Shepard. The court cited Castle v. Texas, a 1950 decision that found the exclusion of jurors based solely on race to be unconstitutional. Preparation for a second trial began. In stark contrast to the first, the attorney had sufficient time to prepare. Alex Ackerman would again serve as lead local counsel.
They also needed more lawyers to do some legwork. My father was one of those lawyers. He interviewed bartenders and people who were there that night who were able to provide alibi testimony on behalf of both of those guys. He also did a lot of the drafting of a lot of the motions in the case. My father was a first or second year lawyer at the time he got this case. If you can imagine, coming out of school and one of your first cases is working with Thurgood Marshall, it would be like being a rookie going to the Super Bowl.
Pre-trial motions were to be heard at Lake County Courthouse in Tavares on November 7, 1951. On the evening of November 6th, Willis McCall set out to pick up Irvin Shepard from Rayford. Deputy Yates followed in a separate car.
The sheriff made Samuel and me get in the front seat of his car. I was in the middle, Samuel next to the door. We were still handcuffed. After a little, the sheriff said he believed that something was wrong with his tire. He drove a little bit on the road and stopped. He got out and looked at the tire. We rode about 2 more miles when he again drove to the side of the road.
And change my tire.
McCall, after shooting them, calls his deputy. You need to round up as many people as you can. So Deputy Yates went to the Umatilla City Commission meeting that was in progress and said the sheriff's had trouble and he needs us out on this lonely road. And about 20 of McCall's friends end up on the crime scene. Samuel Shepard is shot right between the eyes and the forehead and died instantly.
Was barely breathing. He was shot through the neck, the chest. He was hemorrhaging blood. McCall claims that they tried to jump him and escape, and that he shot them defending his life. This was so sensational, even some of McCall's greatest supporters could not believe what they were witnessing. Jesse calls his friend Mabel Norris Reese and says, "I don't believe they tried to escape at all. I think this was deliberate. I think McCall shot him."
Walter Irvin surprised everybody by surviving emergency surgery move 2 of the bullets that night.
And now everybody in the world starts descending on Lake County. Herds of reporters. Thurgood Marshall, the governor, sends his special investigator. In one room, Willis McCall with a bandage over his head and his glasses broken. Right down the hall, you have Irvin hooked up to tubes and wires, hanging on for dear life, and reporters roaming the halls trying to get this story.
But the world would have to wait. McCall ordered Yates to keep people away from Irvin. Yates turned away Ackerman and Irvin's parents, but one man was able to get past him.
One of the first people to interview Walter Irvin was Jesse Hunter, the prosecutor.
"Walter, you're about to meet your... There's nobody else here to hear it, but I need... Did you rape that girl?"
No, I did not.
Which took Hunter that not only did he believe that shot him on purpose, that maybe Irvin really didn't do it. The guy also came in, they took testimony from Walter Irvin, but what really blew the thing wide open was There were several reporters, including Mabel Norris-Reese and Thurgood Marshall and the governor's investigator. And Irvin told this incredible story.
I remember he reached and got the flashlight and got out of the car and walked up toward the front. He kicked the front tire and walked around the front of the car to the side next to Shepard. Then opened the car door and said, "Get out there and get me a tire to fix my car." We started to get out when the sheriff shot Shepard, causing him to fall back against the back part of the door. Then the sheriff turned and shot me. I was still in the front seat, and I don't remember exactly, but I believe the sheriff then shot Shepard again. He then reached in and grabbed by the clothes and pulled me out. Both Shepard and me falling to the ground. I remember the sheriff calling on the radio and telling Mr. Yates that he better come back. And he said they attacked me and I fixed them up good. A short time later, Yates came back. I remember Mr. Yates came over to me where I was lying on the ground and put a flashlight on me. And he said, "He's not dead yet. We had better killing him." He then shot me, and I remember the shot hitting me in the neck. I made no attempt to move because I wasn't dead and didn't want them to know it. The sheriff reached up and grabbed his shirt with his hand and tore it. I heard him tell Mr. Yates, "We got to make it look like they tried to escape."
We now have these two completely opposite stories that just blow up in the press around the world. At this point, it became an international scandal. The Soviet ambassador is going on saying this is what civil rights in America.
On November 9th, an inquest convened. It was led by Judge W. Troy Hall, a boyhood friend of the sheriff. Just 2 days earlier, Hall had acted as McCall's spokesman while the sheriff was ensconced in the hospital room.
The inquest into the shooting of Shepard and Irvin was a most unusual affair because those who heard the evidence were from among the people that McCall handpicked to come out to the shooting. And they were the ones who found that he was not at fault, that he had in fact acted in self-defense.
But another inquiry was just getting started.
The FBI came to Lake County and did a thorough investigation. Actually, they couldn't account for all of the bullets. There was one missing. And back over the scene, they finally found the sixth bullet, and they found it on the ground underneath where Walter Irvin had been laying. And they concluded that the bullet must have been fired from the trajectory that Walter Irvin had said. Somebody stood above him and shot down into him.
The FBI also found that McCall's shirt could have been torn by the wearer, and they noted how Walter Irvin consented to a polygraph test. McCall and Yates both refused. But in the end, the Department of Justice concluded the facts did not warrant a presentation to a grand jury.
The shooting was probably the first time that McCall was roundly criticized and questioned. But the northern papers, particularly the New York Post, just ripped him apart. I mean, J. Nelson Tuck analyzed the path of each bullet, basically said this is a cold-blooded murderer and that this sheriff silenced these prisoners. Even Florida journalists that he had had for years were saying, this doesn't look right.
Irvin's new trial would begin February 11th. Assisted by Jack Greenberg, a young lawyer he had brought on 2 years earlier, Marshall intended to lead the defense himself. Judge Futch had granted Ackerman's motion to move the trial. It would now be held in neighboring Marion County, allowing him to remain presiding judge. But Jesse Hunter objected to having the NAACP lawyer represent Walter Irvin. Judge Futch denied the request.
Well, we were delighted at that because that was another grounds for reversal. But he thought about it overnight and he got back in, and it's not that he wanted us in, you know. And he was leaning over back to make sure that it wouldn't be reversed again.
The trial convened February 11th, 1952, in the Marion County Courthouse in Ocala, barely 20 miles from the Lake County line.
Before they get into the nuts and bolts of the testimony, Thurgood Marshall received a message from the prosecutor, Jess Hunter, who said, we're willing to cut a deal with you, that if your guy, Walter Irvin, will say he's guilty, he'll get life. Marshall was shocked. He didn't know why there was a change of heart and took the deal to Walter Irvin. Sure better alternative than going to the electric chair. Walter thought about it, talked to his family, came back and said, okay, I guess it's the way to go. What do I have to do? Marshall said, it's real simple. When the judge asks you, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty? All you have to say guilty. And Walter looked at him and said, does that mean that I raped that woman? And Thurgood looked at him and said, technically, yeah, it's an admission of guilt.
I was there, and he said, I won't tell a lie on myself.
Thurgood Marshall said if he had any, even the slightest doubt about Walter Irvin's innocence or guilt at that time, he knew he was talking to an innocent man.
The prosecution's presentation was a virtual carbon copy of the first trial.
The state's case is hinging almost completely on Norma Paget. She's different this time. The first trial, she seemed to be glory being the star of this sensational trial. She was confident, almost flippant. This time it's a little different. She's separated from her husband. She's got a couple small babies, and she's tired of the publicity. She doesn't make as formal a witness, but again, she says that Walter Irvin attacked her, raped her, and that's really all they needed. The defense had an ace in the hole for the retrial. In fact, the press called him the star witness, and that was Lawrence Burtoft, the young man who had met Norma the morning that she said she had been assaulted.
And I just said, the truth is not hard to remember. It's a lie that's hard to remember. I can only say that what she told me, that they did not hurt her, and that she could not recognize.
So that was the testimony as close as the defense could to just outright contradicting Norma's story that she had been raped. But the prosecution just said he had a grudge against the state, basically called him American, and tried to portray him as somebody who had an axe to grind and really minimize the impact of his testimony.
But then they tried, as I said, tried to discredit me. They had some that testified that I wasn't a very good person. The situation was so volatile that they just, whatever they did.
The defense also called an expert witness who questioned the authenticity of the plaster casts Deputy Yates said he made at the crime.
He said these footprints showed the signs of having been down into the ground instead of having been made in a normal walking motion. And I think that's persuasive. You don't think about it, but somebody who's done that sort of thing for years understands that. And that's how the impressions were made. They were made not normal walking, but by the heel and the toe being pressed down. And to just ridicule that.
The state quickly diffused this expert, writing how much the defense had paid him and portrayed him as this, high-powered outsider talking in all these scientific terms, and the impact of what he presented was totally lost on the jury.
The defense had one more shot. The closing argument would be delivered in part by Thurgood Marshall himself. Marshall appealed to the jury's sense of patriotism and duty. He praised the Constitution's guarantees and the American system of government. He asked if Walter Irvin had acted like a guilty man the morning of the alleged rape. Following a recess, Ackerman of the jury. He pointed out the lack of any medical evidence that a rape had occurred. He asked why the stains on Walter Irvin's pants hadn't been analyzed. He even appealed to the jury's racial attitudes, questioning whether any white could identify a Negro after meeting him just once. Finally, it was Hunter's turn.
Here's this young girl, Norma Paget. You saw her here on the stand. She was an honest old cracker girl born and raised up in Florida. She was a poor, honest girl and had never even probably out of Lake County, had never been in any trouble in her life. ask you, who you going to believe? Now, gentlemen, she sat there in that car, being held prisoner, and she told you she was afraid. She was afraid for her life, and oh my God, would she not be? For a woman's chastity is the greatest thing on earth to her. There's nothing in the world compares to it. She has lived to tell this story, and you gentlemen, forget that thing, that horrible thing will never be erased from her mind.
When Hunter had quit, Marshall reminded Irvin of the plea offer, which stood until the case went to jury. The now 24-year-old Army veteran, who had endured 2 trials, torture, 3 bullets tearing through his flesh, and 2.5 years of row, had minutes to choose between life in prison and a certain death sentence.
I didn't do it.
The verdict in the second trial was a carbon copy of the verdict in the first trial. Walter Irvin, guilty of rape, sentenced to the electric chair. Again, a very short deliberation. The verdict was never in.
Marshall and his team quickly appealed. A motion for a new trial was dismissed by Judge Futch. In June 1953, the Florida Supreme Court again upheld the trial court. A petition to the U.S. Supreme Court was denied in January 1954. Walter Irvin was running out of options. On November 1st, Florida Governor Charlie Johns signed Walter Irvin's death warrant. He was set to die 1 week later. Marshall knew that Johns, an unrepentant segregationist, was intent on seeing Irvin electrocuted. But Johns was a lame duck. He had recently lost a special election to Leroy Collins, who would take office in 2 months. If Irvin could be spared until January, Marshall believed Collins would be more open-minded. On the evening of Saturday, November 6th, Marshall convinced the U.S. Supreme Court to grant a stay of Irvin's execution so they could consider a petition to review new evidence in the case. Walter Irvin would live to see the new year. Leroy Collins was sworn in as Florida governor on January 4th, 1955. But unlike his predecessor, Collins was annoyed to see Walter Irvin die.
Walter Irvin finds himself a champion. Governor Leroy Collins, the NAACP, has kept the pressure on trying to save Walter from the electric chair. The St. Petersburg Times is writing things. There's an association of pastors that are putting together a petition. There's a lot of pressure on the governor to spare Irvin's life.
On December 6, 1955, Collins announced his decision. In all respects, he said, my conscience told me that this was a bad case, badly handled, badly tried, and now on this bad performance, I was asked to take a man's life. My conscience would not let me do this. Led by the governor, the parole board voted unanimously to commute Walter Irvin's death sentence.
I think the ramifications of Groveland are just so far-reaching. What I hope it does is make us look at ourselves and say, were people really capable of that? Where would I have been if I was involved? Would I have stood up and said, this is wrong? These guys are being railroaded? Would I have gone along? Would I have tried to be a voice of reason?
And the level of response to it went way beyond the usual suspects of even the liberal press or the black press. The governor of Florida received just stacks and stacks and stacks of letters and telegrams from just normal people saying, I am ashamed to be an American and see this happen. I don't know what to tell my children about justice in America.
Too often that we sit in judgment, not because of the crime or the event, but because you don't look like me. You don't think like me. You don't pray like me. Those are the things that we are putting forth first before our justice system.
While this act cannot right wrongs done to them, I hope that it will bring peace to their families and to their communities.